Night shift nurse discovers unconscious patient has no visitors. She begins singing gentle lullabies during her rounds. 3 months later, when he finally opens his eyes, his first whispered words leave everyone speechless. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights hummed their endless tune through the corridors of St. Helena Medical Center, casting everything in that peculiar hospital glow that made 3 in the morning feel like a dimension outside of time. Maya Chun adjusted her stethoscope and checked her watch, knowing she had 6 more hours until her shift ended. The intensive care unit was quieter tonight than usual, with only the steady beeping of monitors and the whispered conversations of the skeleton crew keeping the silence at bay. Room 314 had been occupied for 11 weeks now by a patient who had no name on his visitor log. The man appeared to be in his early 30s, with dark hair that had grown longer during his stay and hands that bore the calluses of someone who worked with them for a living. The accident had been severe, a construction site incident that left him with traumatic brain injury and in a coma that doctors weren't sure he would ever wake from. What struck Maya most wasn't his medical condition, though. It was the empty chair beside his bed that had never been filled. She had asked Dr. Patterson about it during her second week of caring for the patient. The attending physician had simply shrugged and explained that the man had been found with no identification, no emergency contacts, and despite media coverage and police investigation, no one had come forward to claim him. They called him John for the hospital records, but even that felt hollow and temporary, like a placeholder for a real life that seemed to have vanished. Maya had been working nights in the ICU for 3 years, ever since graduating from nursing school. She chose the night shift because it paid better and because she preferred the quieter rhythm, the way time moved differently when the rest of the world was sleeping. But she had never encountered a patient quite like this one. Most people in comas had families who maintained vigils, who filled the rooms with photographs and personal items, who talked constantly in the hope that their voices might somehow penetrate the darkness. This man had none of that. His room was sterile, functional, containing only the medical equipment necessary to keep him alive. The walls were bare except for the standard hospital information charts. There were no flowers, no cards, no evidence that anyone in the world was waiting for him to return. During her 3rd week of caring for him, Maya began to notice how profound the silence felt in his room. The other coma patients had the constant background noise of family members, the rustle of newspapers being read aloud, the soft murmur of one-sided conversations. But room 314 existed in a bubble of quiet that felt almost oppressive. She started spending a few extra minutes during her rounds, checking his vital signs more thoroughly than necessary, adjusting his pillows with extra care. It wasn't protocol, and it certainly wasn't efficient, but something about his solitude bothered her in a way she couldn't quite articulate. Maya had grown up in a large, boisterous family where silence was rare and being alone was almost impossible. The idea of someone lying unconscious without a single person to sit beside them struck her as fundamentally wrong. The first time she hummed while checking his it was unconscious. A melody from her childhood, something her grandmother used to sing while braiding her hair. She realized what she was doing and stopped abruptly, looking around as if someone might have heard her. But the hallway was empty, and the patient's monitors continued their steady rhythm, unchanged. 2 nights later, she found herself humming again, this time while adjusting his blankets. The melody was different, a lullaby. Her mother had sung when Maya was sick with fevers as a child. Again, she caught herself and fell silent, but not before noticing that the sound seemed to make the room feel less empty, less like a medical facility and more like a place where healing could happen. Dr. Patterson made his rounds the following morning and paused longer than usual at the foot of the bed in room 314. Maya was completing her shift notes and looked up expectantly. "Any changes overnight?" he asked, though they both knew there rarely were. "Vitals are stable. No seizure activity. Respiration is steady." Maya recited the standard report, but then found herself adding, "Doctor, has anyone ever responded?" 2. I mean, do you think he can hear anything? Dr. Patterson looked at her with tired eyes that had seen too many cases like this one. We honestly don't know. The brain is still largely a mystery to us, especially in cases of traumatic injury like this. Some patients report later that they heard everything. Others remember nothing. We encourage families to talk to patients, play music, maintain some kind of stimulation, but he gestured toward the empty chair, the bare walls. Maya nodded, understanding the unfinished sentence. That night, Maya made a decision that would change everything. As she performed her 11 o'clock rounds, she paused in the doorway of room 314 and looked at the man who had become more than just another patient to her. He looked peaceful in the artificial light, his chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. His face relaxed in a way that made him seem younger than his estimated age. She stepped into the room and closed the door partially behind her. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she began to sing. The song was one her grandmother had taught her, a traditional Chinese lullaby about a mother waiting for her child to come home. Maya's voice was soft and untrained, but it carried a warmth that seemed to change the very atmosphere of the room. She sang the entire song, watching the patient's face for any sign of response, but seeing none. When she finished, the silence that followed felt different somehow. Not empty, but full, as if the room had been holding its breath and could finally exhale. The next night, she sang again. This time it was an English lullaby she remembered from childhood movies, simple and melodic. She stood beside his bed, one hand resting lightly on the rail, and let her voice fill the space between the beeping monitors and the hum of the ventilation system. By the end of her first week of singing, it had become as much a part of her routine as checking vitals or adjusting medications. She began to look forward to those few minutes in room 314, when she could offer this small gift of sound and presence to someone who had no one else. Maya started varying her selections. Sometimes she sang lullabies from her own culture, the melodies her grandmother had passed down through generations. Other nights, she chose songs she remembered from her teenage years. Pop ballads slowed down and softened until they became something new. She discovered she had a natural instinct for what worked in the space, what kinds of rhythms seemed to complement the steady beeping of the heart monitor. Dr. Patterson began to notice subtle changes in the patient's charts. Nothing dramatic, but small improvements in heart rate variability, slightly better sleep patterns based on his EEG readings. When he mentioned it to Maya during one of their brief handoff conversations, she felt her cheeks warm but didn't mention her nightly concerts. The other nurses on the floor began to take notice as well. Sarah, who worked the station closest to room 314, commented one morning that she thought she'd heard music coming from that direction, but when she'd checked, Maya had been the only one in the room. Maybe it was the radio from another room, Maya suggested, but Sarah shook her head. No, it was different. Softer, like someone singing. She paused, studying Maya's face. You have a beautiful voice, you know. I heard you humming yesterday during shift change. Maya felt.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Exposed but also oddly proud. She had never thought of herself as a singer, had never performed for anyone beyond childhood school programs. But something about this situation felt different. This wasn't performance, it was service. It was the only thing she could offer to someone who had been given nothing by the world outside these walls. As the weeks passed, Maya's confidence grew. She began to sing more freely, no longer worried about being overheard. She started bringing her phone to look up lyrics to songs she half remembered, expanding her repertoire to include lullabies. From different cultures, folk songs, even some classical pieces she found online. The patient remained unchanged medically, but Maya began to feel as though she knew him somehow. She started talking to him before and after her songs, sharing small details about her day, telling him about the weather, describing the other patients on the floor and their progress. It felt natural, as if they were having a conversation rather than a one-sided monologue. "I think you'd like today's song," she would say, settling into the chair beside his bed. "It's about coming home." Or, "The cherry blossoms are blooming outside. I can see them from the window. I bet you'd enjoy seeing them when you wake up." She noticed that she had stopped saying "if" and started saying "when." The change had happened gradually, without conscious decision, but it felt important. As if her certainty could somehow reach him through whatever darkness he was navigating. Dr. Patterson continued to document small improvements in the patient's condition. His muscle tone was better, his reflexes slightly more responsive. During one of their monthly case reviews, he mentioned to the team that while there was no dramatic change in consciousness level, the patient seemed to be maintaining better overall stability than they typically saw in long-term coma cases. "It could be coincidence," he told the assembled medical team. "But sometimes the small factors we can't measure make a bigger difference than we realize." The night nursing staff has been particularly attentive to this patient, and that kind of consistent, gentle care can have cumulative effects. Maya felt a flush of pride mixed with anxiety. She wondered if her singing could actually be making a medical difference, or if it was simply making her feel better about an otherwise helpless situation. Either way, she couldn't imagine stopping now. Part 2 3 months into her nightly routine, Maya began to notice changes in herself as much as in her patient. She found herself researching music therapy, reading about the effects of sound on unconscious patients, learning about the ways melody and rhythm could influence brain activity. She discovered studies showing that familiar music could sometimes reach parts of the brain that remained active even during coma states. She also began to craft what she thought of as his musical story. Since he had no known history, no family to share memories of his favorite songs, Maya created a soundtrack for him based on what she imagined he might have enjoyed. She included songs that spoke to different aspects of human experience: love, loss, hope, homecoming, adventure, peace. The night shift became something she eagerly anticipated rather than simply endured. Her coworkers noticed the change in her energy, the way she seemed more engaged with all her patients, not just the one in room 314. The music she shared with him seemed to be healing something in her as well, though she couldn't quite identify what had needed healing. Maya's personal life began to change too. She started singing in her car, humming while doing household chores, even joining a community choir that met on her days off. The confidence she had found in room 314, the sense that her voice mattered, began to extend into other areas of her life. Her mother noticed the difference during one of their weekly phone calls. "You sound happy," she said. "Really happy, not just okay. What's changed?" Maya struggled to explain without revealing the details of her patient's situation. "I think I've found something I'm good at," she said finally. "Something that feels important." The patient's condition remained stable, but Dr. Patterson began to express cautious optimism about his long-term prognosis. Brain scans showed increased activity in certain regions, and his physical responses to stimuli were becoming more consistent. There was still no sign of consciousness returning, but the medical team felt encouraged by his steady improvement. Maya overheard Dr. Patterson talking to one of the residents about the case. "Sometimes," he was saying, "the best medicine we can provide is simply not giving up. This patient has had consistent, compassionate care for months now, and I think that makes a difference in ways we don't fully understand." She wondered if he suspected her role in the patient's care, or if he was simply referring to the general attention the nursing staff provided. Either way, she felt validated in her choice to sing for someone who might never even know she had been there. As autumn approached, Maya realized she had been caring for the unnamed patient for almost 4 months. She had sung hundreds of songs, spent countless hours beside his bed, and come to think of him as one of the most important relationships in her life, even though it was entirely one-sided. She began to worry about what would happen if he woke up. Would he remember her voice? Would he feel awkward about the intimacy she had created without his permission? Would he be grateful or embarrassed? She realized she had never considered that her nightly songs might feel intrusive to someone who regained consciousness. But those concerns faded when she was actually in his room, watching his peaceful face in the dim light, feeling the way her voice seemed to transform the clinical space into something warmer and more human. Whatever happened if he woke up, she knew that what she was doing now felt right and necessary. Maya also began to think about the broader implications of what she had learned. How many other patients in hospitals around the world were lying alone, with no one to talk to them or sing to them or simply sit with them? How many people were healing in silence when they could be healing with music and human connection? She started volunteering with the hospital's patient advocacy program on her days off, reading to elderly patients who had few visitors, playing simple games with children in the pediatric ward, offering her presence to anyone who seemed lonely or afraid. The confidence she had gained through singing to one unconscious patient was expanding into a broader sense of how she could serve others. Dr. Patterson approached her one evening as she was beginning her shift. "Maya, I wanted to talk to you about the patient in 314. Her heart raced, wondering if someone had finally complained about her singing or if there had been some kind of policy violation she wasn't aware of. His scans have shown remarkable improvement over the past few months," Dr. Patterson continued. "We're seeing activity levels that suggest he may be moving toward consciousness. It could still take weeks or months, but I wanted to prepare you and the rest of the night staff for the possibility that he might wake up during your shifts." Maya felt a mixture of excitement and terror. "What should we do if that happens?" "Stay calm, keep him comfortable, and call me immediately." "But Maya," he paused, studying her face, "I want you to know that your care of this patient has been exceptional. Whatever you've been doing, it's working. Don't change anything." That night, Maya's voice trembled slightly as she began her usual lullaby. The possibility that this might be one of her last opportunities to sing to him unobserved made each note feel precious. She chose her grandmother's favorite song, the one about a mother's love that transcends distance and time. As she sang, she found herself really looking at his face, memorizing the details she had come to know so well. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his hair curled slightly at the temples, the laugh lines around his eyes, that suggested he had been someone who smiled often before the accident. "I hope you've been able to hear me," she whispered when the song ended. "I hope you know that someone has been here with you, that you haven't been alone." She squeezed his hand gently, as she had started doing in recent weeks, and was startled to feel the faintest pressure in return. She froze, wondering if she had imagined it. But there it was again, the slightest movement of his fingers against hers. Maya's heart pounded as she reached for the call button, then hesitated. The movement had been so subtle, so brief. Was it really a sign of consciousness, or just an involuntary muscle spasm? She decided to wait, to watch for any other changes before alerting the medical team. She stayed by his bedside for the rest of her shift, singing softly and watching for any further signs of awareness. Just before dawn, as she was preparing to leave, she could have sworn she saw his eyelids flutter. Part 3. The next few nights passed in a state of heightened anticipation. Maya found herself checking on room 314 more frequently, watching for any sign that consciousness was returning. She mentioned the possible hand squeeze to Dr. Patterson, who examined the patient thoroughly but found no clear evidence of awakening. It could have been a positive sign, he told her, or it could have been nothing. At this stage, we just have to wait and watch. Maya's singing took on new urgency. She found herself choosing songs about awakening, about returning to life, about hope and renewal. Her voice carried a different quality now, charged with anticipation and a kind of desperate optimism. Sarah, the nurse at the nearby station, started commenting more frequently about the music she heard coming from room 314. "Whoever is singing has such a beautiful voice," she said one morning. "It makes the whole floor feel more peaceful." Other staff members began to notice as well. The night janitor mentioned to Maya that he looked forward to passing by room 314 during his rounds because of the angels singing in there. Even Dr. Patterson seemed to linger longer during his early morning checks, though he never said anything directly about the music. Maya realized that her secret wasn't really secret anymore, but rather than feeling exposed, she felt supported. It seemed as though the entire night shift had become invested in this patient's recovery, drawn together by the music that filled the otherwise clinical space. One evening in late October, Maya arrived for her shift to find Dr. Patterson waiting for her at the nurse's station. His expression was serious but not grave, the look of someone with important news to share. The patient in 314 is showing significant signs of neurological improvement, he said without preamble. His latest brain scans indicate activity levels consistent with lighter stages of coma. We think he may regain consciousness within the next few days. Maya felt her world shift. After months of singing to someone who had never responded, the possibility that he might actually wake up felt both miraculous and terrifying. What does that mean for his care? She asked. We'll be monitoring him much more closely. We may need to adjust his medications, and we'll want someone with him when consciousness returns. I know you've developed a special connection with this patient, Maya. Would you be willing to take extra shifts this week to ensure continuity of care? She nodded immediately, though her mind was racing with questions she couldn't ask. What would she say to him if he woke up during one of her shifts? How would she explain the months of one-sided conversation and song? Would he remember any of it? That night, Maya's usual routine felt charged with possibility. As she entered room 314, she looked at the patient with new eyes, seeing not just someone lost in unconsciousness, but someone on the verge of returning to the world. I hear you might be waking up soon, she said softly, settling into the chair beside his bed. I want you to know that when you do, you won't be alone. There are people here who have been taking care of you, who want to see you get better. She began to sing a song she had never sung for him before, one that had been running through her mind all day. It was a simple melody about coming home, about finding your way back to the people who love you. As she sang, she realized she was crying, though she couldn't say exactly why. The next night brought the first clear sign that consciousness was returning. Maya was in the middle of a lullaby when she noticed his breathing pattern change, becoming less regular, more natural. She stopped singing and leaned closer, watching his face intently. His eyelids fluttered, then opened briefly before closing. Again, Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as she reached for the call button, then decided to wait a moment longer. His eyes opened again, unfocused and confused, searching the ceiling as if trying to understand where he was. Hi, Maya said softly. You're in the hospital. You're safe. You had an accident, but you're going to be okay. His eyes found her face and seemed to struggle to focus. His mouth opened slightly, as if he were trying to speak, but no sound came out. Don't try to talk yet, Maya said. Your throat is probably sore from the breathing tube. Just rest. I'm going to call the doctor. But as she reached for the call button, he made a small sound, a whisper so quiet she had to lean close to hear it. Angel, he said, his voice barely audible but unmistakably clear. The angel who sings. Maya froze, her hand hovering over the call button. What did you say? His eyes found hers again, and this time they seemed more alert, more present. I heard you, he whispered. Every night. Your voice. It kept me from going too far away. Tears ran down Maya's cheeks as she finally pressed the call button for Dr. Patterson. But even as she heard footsteps rushing down the hallway, she couldn't take her eyes off the man who had just spoken his first words after 4 months of silence. You heard me singing? She asked. He nodded slightly, the movement clearly difficult but deliberate. Beautiful, he whispered. Made me want to come back. Dr. Patterson burst into the room with 2 other medical staff members immediately, beginning the protocol for newly conscious coma patients. They checked his pupils, tested his reflexes, asked him basic questions about his awareness of time and place. Maya stepped back to give them room to work, but the patient's eyes kept searching for her among the faces surrounding his bed. When Dr. Patterson asked him if he knew where he was, he answered correctly. When asked if he remembered what had happened to him, he said he remembered falling, then nothing until he heard an angel singing. Dr. Patterson looked puzzled by the reference to an angel, but continued his examination. The patient's responses were appropriate but limited, which was normal for someone emerging from a long coma. His motor skills were weak but present. His speech was unclear but improving by the minute. As the medical team prepared to move him to a different unit for closer monitoring, the patient grabbed Maya's hand with surprising strength. "Don't stop," he whispered urgently. "Please don't stop singing." Maya looked at Dr. Patterson, who nodded his approval. "I won't stop," she promised. "I'll sing for you whenever you want." The patient smiled then, the first real expression of joy anyone had seen from him, and Maya knew that everything about her life was about to change. Part 4. The patient's awakening created a buzz throughout the hospital that extended far beyond the ICU. Word spread quickly about the man who had emerged from a 4-month coma, asking about an angel who sang to him. Nurses from other floors began finding excuses to walk past his new room, curious about the patient whose recovery had become the most hopeful story anyone could remember. Dr. Patterson was cautiously optimistic but realistic about the challenges ahead. "He's made remarkable progress," he explained to Maya during one of their shift briefings. "But recovery from this kind of brain injury is usually a long process. He'll need physical therapy, occupational therapy, and probably months of rehabilitation before we know the full extent of his recovery." Maya nodded, understanding that what had felt like a miracle was actually just the beginning of a much longer journey. But she also couldn't forget the clarity in his eyes when he had recognized her voice, the way he had smiled when she promised to keep singing. The patient, who still had no identified name or family, had been moved to a step-down unit where he could receive more intensive rehabilitation services. Maya requested permission to continue as one of his primary nurses, and Dr. Patterson readily agreed, noting that her presence seemed to have a positive effect on his motivation and mood. On her first shift in his new room, Maya found him awake and alert, sitting up slightly in bed and looking out the window at the city lights below. He turned when she entered, and his face brightened with recognition. "The angel," he said, his voice stronger than it had been 2 days earlier. "I was hoping you'd come." Maya felt her cheeks warm. "I'm not an angel. I'm just a nurse. My name is Maya." He studied her face as if memorizing it. "Maya," he repeated. "That's a beautiful name. Well, I guess I don't know what my name is yet." The police investigation into his identity was ongoing, but so far had yielded no results. It was as if he had appeared in the world fully formed at the moment of his accident, with no past to claim him. "Do you remember anything?" Maya asked as she checked his vital signs. "Anything from before the accident?" He closed his eyes, concentrating. "Fragments. Images that might be memories or might be dreams. I remember the smell of sawdust, the sound of hammers. I think I worked with my hands. But faces, names, places. It's all blank." Maya felt a deep sadness for this man who had awakened to find himself alone in the world in ways that went far beyond the empty visitor chair. "The memories might come back," she said hopefully. "The doctors say recovery can continue for months or even years." He nodded, then looked at her with an expression of intense gratitude. "Maya, I need you to know something. When I was, wherever I was, your voice was the only thing that felt real. It was like a rope I could hold on to when everything else was darkness." Maya felt tears threatening again. "I just sang lullabies. I didn't think. I hoped you could hear me, but I wasn't sure. I heard every song," he said softly. "They became part of me. Sometimes I think your voice is the only reason I found my way back." That night, Maya sang for him while he was fully conscious for the first time. She chose the Chinese lullaby her grandmother had taught her, the one about a mother waiting for her child to come home. As her voice filled the room, she watched his face relax, saw the tension leave his shoulders. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "That one was special," he said finally. "I remember that one from the darkness. It felt like love." Maya's heart contracted. "It is about love." About someone who never stops waiting for you to come home. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. Maybe that's what you were for me. Someone waiting for me to come home. Over the following days, Maya witnessed his remarkable progress. His speech became clearer, his motor skills improved, and his cognitive abilities seemed largely intact despite the length of his coma. Physical therapists worked with him on basic mobility. Occupational therapists helped him relearn simple tasks, and social workers continued trying to piece together his identity. But it was during Maya's shifts that he seemed most engaged, most motivated to work toward recovery. She continued to sing for him, but now their interactions included conversation, laughter, and a growing friendship that felt both natural and profound. He told her about the fragments of memory that occasionally surfaced, the dreams that might have been glimpses of his past life. She shared stories about her family, her grandmother's lullabies, her decision to become a nurse. They talked about music, about the way certain melodies could transport you to different times and places. Maya found herself looking forward to their conversations as much as their musical moments. He was intelligent, thoughtful, and surprisingly funny despite his circumstances. He had theories about his past based on the calluses on his hands and the way he instinctively knew how to fix a loose screw on his bed rail. He made jokes about being a mystery man, as if his amnesia were an adventure rather than a tragedy. Dr. Patterson noticed the positive changes in his patient's demeanor and recovery speed. "Whatever you're doing with him is working," he told Maya. "His progress has been exceptional since he regained consciousness. I've never seen anyone emerge from a coma with such determination and optimism." Maya wondered if her patient's attitude was partly a defense mechanism, a way of coping with the reality of his situation. But she also saw genuine joy in his eyes when she sang, real contentment in their quiet conversations, and a kind of peace that suggested he was finding meaning in his present rather than being consumed by his lost past. 3 weeks after his awakening, the patient's physical recovery had progressed to the point where he could walk short distances with assistance and perform basic self-care tasks. The medical team was amazed by how quickly his brain seemed to be rewiring itself, compensating for the damage caused by his injury. But it was his emotional resilience that impressed everyone most. Despite having no family, no friends, no identified past, he approached each day with curiosity and gratitude. He befriended other patients, encouraged those who were struggling with their own recoveries, and somehow managed to make the rehabilitation unit feel more hopeful just by being himself. Maya realized she was falling in love with him, though she tried to tell herself it was just compassion for someone in an impossible situation. But she couldn't deny the way her heart raced when she saw him, the way their conversations could make her forget she was at work, the way his smile seemed to light up not just his face but the entire room. She also couldn't ignore the way he looked at her, as if she were the most important person in his newly reconstructed world, which, she realized, she probably was. She was his only consistent connection, the one person who had been with him from his darkest moment to his recovery. One evening, as she was preparing to end her shift, he asked her to stay a few extra minutes. "Maya," he said, reaching for her hand, "I know this might sound crazy, given my situation, but I think I'm falling in love with you." Maya felt her world shift again, the way it had the night he first woke up. "You don't even know who you are," she said gently. "How can you know what you feel?" He smiled, the expression both sad and hopeful. "Maybe that's exactly why I can know. I have no past to compare this to, no history of heartbreak or disappointment to make me doubt what I feel. All I know is that your voice brought me back to life, and your presence makes me want to keep living." Maya squeezed his hand, but didn't answer immediately. She was thinking about professional boundaries, about the vulnerability of his situation, about the complexity of loving someone who might remember a completely different life at any moment. "I care about you too," she said finally. "More than I should, probably. But you're still recovering, still figuring out who you are. Maybe we should wait and see what happens." He nodded, understanding but clearly disappointed. "I know you're right. But Maya, Whatever happens, whatever I remember or don't remember, I want you to know that you saved me. Not just medically, but in every way that matters. That night, Maya sang a different kind of song for him. Not a lullaby, but a love song. Soft and gentle and full of all the feelings she couldn't quite express in words. As she sang, she realized that whatever happened next, this man had changed her life as much as she had changed his. Part 5. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning in late November, 6 weeks after the patient had regained consciousness. Maya was arriving for her shift when she saw Dr. Patterson and a police detective walking toward the rehabilitation unit, their expressions serious but hopeful. She followed at a distance, her heart pounding with the certainty that something significant was about to happen. They were heading toward his room, and she could hear voices inside, animated conversation that sounded different from the usual. Medical consultations. Maya paused outside the door, not wanting to intrude but unable to walk away. Through the partially open door, she could see the patient sitting up in bed, his face animated with an expression she had never seen before. Excitement mixed with disbelief, joy shadowed by confusion. "Daniel," she heard Dr. Patterson say. "Is that definitely your name?" "Daniel Martinez," the patient replied, his voice stronger and more confident than she had ever heard it. "I remember. Now, I remember everything." Maya felt her heart sink even as she celebrated his recovery. Daniel. He had a name, which meant he had a life, a past, probably people who had been looking for him. The mysterious man she had fallen in love with was about to become someone else entirely. Dr. Patterson noticed her in the doorway and gestured for her to come in. "Maya, this is wonderful news. Daniel has recovered his memory. It seems he was reported missing from a construction site in another state, and his family has been searching for him all this time." Daniel looked at her, his eyes bright with memory, but also soft with something that looked like regret. "Maya," he said quietly, "I remember my life before. My family, my job, my friends. But I also remember every moment since I woke up. I remember every song you sang, every conversation we had, every feeling I've discovered." The police detective was asking questions about his disappearance, the circumstances that had led him so far from home with no identification. Daniel answered them mechanically, but his eyes kept returning to Maya's face. "My family," he said, to Dr. Patterson. "Have they been contacted? We're reaching out to them now. They should be here by tomorrow." Maya felt herself becoming invisible in the room, no longer the central figure in Daniel's recovery, but simply the nurse who had happened to be assigned to his case. She excused herself quietly, saying she needed to check on other patients, and slipped out into the hallway. She made it to the supply closet before the tears came, months of suppressed emotion finally breaking through. She had known this moment might come, had prepared herself for the possibility that his memory would return and change everything. But she hadn't anticipated how much it would hurt to watch him become someone else right before her eyes. Sarah found her there 20 minutes later, sitting on the floor surrounded by boxes of medical supplies, crying like her heart was breaking. "Maya, honey, what happened? I heard about Daniel remembering his name. Isn't that wonderful?" "It is wonderful," Maya said, wiping her eyes. "It's exactly what we hoped for. He's going to get his life back, his family. It's a miracle." Sarah studied her face with the insight of someone who had worked night shifts long enough to recognize. "Heartbreak. You fell in love with him." Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. "And he fell in love with you too, didn't he?" Another nod. Sarah sat down beside her on the supply closet floor. "Maya, just because he remembers his past doesn't mean he forgets his present. You've been the most important person in his world. For months. That doesn't just disappear." "But he has a family," Maya said. "A whole life I'm not part of. How can I compete with that?" "Maybe you don't have to compete. Maybe you just have to see what happens." That evening, Maya approached Daniel's room with more nervousness than she had felt since her first day as a nurse. She could hear voices inside, phone conversations with family members who had been waiting months for this call. When she knocked and entered, Daniel was sitting by the window, no longer on the phone, staring out at the city lights with an expression of deep contemplation. "Maya," he said, turning toward her with relief evident in his voice. "I've been waiting for you." She approached cautiously, unsure of her role now that he was no longer just her patient, but Daniel Martinez, a man with a family driving through the night to reach him. "How are you feeling?" she asked, falling back on professional routine because she didn't know what else to say. "Confused," he said honestly. "Grateful. Overwhelmed. I talked to my sister, my parents, my brother. They've been searching for me since the day I disappeared. They never gave up hope." Maya smiled, genuine happiness breaking through her own sadness. "That's wonderful. You'll be with people who love you soon." Daniel stood and moved closer to her. "Maya, I need you to understand something. Getting my memory back didn't erase anything that happened here. If anything, it made me realize how extraordinary what we found together really is. Daniel, you have a family waiting for you. You have a whole life to return to." "I do," he agreed. "But I also have feelings for you that I never had before. The accident, feelings that aren't part of my recovered memories, but part of who I've become. The person I was before didn't know you existed. The person I am now can't imagine existing without you." Maya felt tears threatening again. "Your family has been waiting for months. They need you to come home." "And I will," Daniel said. "But, Maya, what if home isn't just a place you return to? What if it's also something you build with someone who saves your life in ways that have nothing to do with medicine?" Before Maya could respond, they were interrupted by a knock on the door. Dr. Patterson entered with a woman in her 30s who had Daniel's eyes and the same gentle smile Maya had come to love. "Daniel," the woman said, her voice breaking as she saw her brother for the first time in months. Daniel moved toward her, and Maya watched as they embraced, seeing the profound relief and joy of a family reunited. She started to slip quietly from the room, but Daniel caught her hand. "Carmen, this is Maya," he said, his voice full of warmth and pride. "She's the nurse who took care of me, who sang to me every night when I was unconscious. She's the reason I found my way back." Carmen turned to Maya with tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you for bringing my brother back to us. I'm just glad he's recovered," Maya said, feeling awkward in the face of such raw family emotion. "She's more than just glad," Daniel said quietly. "She's the woman I love." The words hung in the air, simple and honest, and completely unexpected. Carmen looked between them, understanding immediately passing across her face. "Daniel," she said gently, "we have a lot to talk about." Over the next hour, as Daniel's parents and younger brother arrived, Maya witnessed the profound joy of a family miracle. She also saw Daniel struggling to balance his recovered past with his present feelings, watched him try to explain to his family that the man who had returned to them was not exactly the same man who had disappeared. His family was loving, understanding, and grateful beyond words for his recovery. They were also confused by his attachment to Maya, uncertain how to process the idea that their son and brother had fallen in love with someone they had never met during a period of his life they had not been part of. Maya spent most of the evening in the hallway, giving the family privacy, but staying nearby in case Daniel needed anything. She could hear laughter and crying, excited conversation, and long periods of quiet reunion. When visiting hours ended and the family reluctantly left for their hotel, Daniel asked Maya to stay. "I know this is complicated," he said as soon as they were alone. "I know my family doesn't understand, and I know you're probably thinking, this is all too much, too fast, too impossible." Maya sat in the chair beside his bed, the same chair where she had spent countless nights singing to him when he couldn't hear her. "It is complicated," she agreed. "Your family loves you. They've been waiting for you to come home. And I love them too," Daniel said. "But Maya, I need you to understand something. The accident didn't just give me brain damage. It also gave me clarity about what matters. I lost my memory, but I found something I didn't even know I was looking for." "Daniel, let me finish," he said gently. "Tomorrow, I'll probably be discharged from the hospital. My family wants me to come home with them to finish my recovery. And I should go, I know that. But I also know that leaving you feels like losing myself all over again. Maya looked at this man who had become so important to her, who had changed from a nameless patient into someone she couldn't imagine living without. What are you saying? I'm saying that I want to go home and reconnect with my family, but I also want you to be part of my life. I know it's asking a lot. I know it's complicated, but Maya, what if this is what love actually looks like? Not convenient or simple or easy, but worth fighting for anyway? Maya was quiet for a long time, thinking about the months of caring for him, the way her voice had apparently reached him in unconsciousness, the connection they had built in, the strange space between illness and recovery. Your family is 3 states away, she said finally. I know. You're still recovering from a traumatic brain injury. I know. We've known each other for less than 2 months as conscious people. I know. Maya looked at him, this man who had literally awakened to find her voice the first familiar thing in his world. But you heard me singing for months before. That. Daniel smiled, the expression that had become her favorite thing in the world. I did. And Maya, I fell in love with your voice before I ever saw your face. I fell in love with your kindness before I knew your name. Maybe that's not conventional, but maybe it's something even better than conventional. That night, Maya sang for Daniel one last time as a patient in the hospital. She chose the lullaby that had started it all, her grandmother's song about waiting for someone to come home. But as she sang, she realized that the meaning had changed. It was no longer about waiting for someone to return, but about being brave enough to create a new definition of home. Part 6. 3 months later, Maya stood in the parking lot of a small rehabilitation center in Colorado, holding a suitcase and looking up at the mountains that surrounded Daniel's hometown. She had taken a leave of absence from the hospital, used her savings to relocate temporarily, and accepted a position at the facility where Daniel was completing his outpatient therapy. It had been the most terrifying and exhilarating decision of her life. Daniel's family had initially been skeptical about their relationship, concerned that he was confusing gratitude with love, worried that he was making major life decisions while still recovering from his injury. But over the weeks since his discharge, as they saw how consistently happy he was when talking to Maya during their daily phone calls, how his recovery accelerated when she was part of his support system, they began to understand that what had developed between them was real and lasting. Carmen had been the first to come around, calling Maya directly one evening to say, I can hear something in my brother's voice that was never there before. Even before his accident, he was never quite this settled, this sure of himself. Daniel's parents had visited the hospital before his discharge, spending time with Maya and beginning to understand the unique bond that had formed during his unconscious months. His mother had cried when Maya explained about the nightly lullabies, about the way she had tried to make sure he was never truly alone. You loved him before you knew him, she had said. That's not something that happens every day. Now, as Maya walked into the rehabilitation center for her first day of work, she felt nervous but confident. She had spent her career caring for people in crisis, but this felt like the beginning of something entirely new, a chance to be part of healing that extended beyond medicine into the realm of building a life together. Daniel was waiting for her in the lobby, looking healthier and stronger than she had ever seen him. His physical therapy had progressed remarkably, his cognitive function had returned to normal levels, and his doctors were amazed by his complete recovery. You came, he said, as if there had been any doubt. I came, Maya confirmed, setting down her suitcase and moving into his arms. They held each other in the middle of the busy lobby, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and chosen to build something real from that impossible beginning. Are you sure about this? Daniel asked. Leaving your job, your family, everything familiar? Maya thought about her grandmother's lullabies, about the way music could bridge any distance, about the courage it took to sing into darkness without knowing if anyone was listening. I'm sure, she said. Besides, I'm not leaving everything. I'm bringing the most important thing with me. What's that? My voice, Maya said. and the knowledge that sometimes the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in caring for someone else. Daniel smiled and took her hand. "Come on," he said. "Let me show you our new life." As they walked through the rehabilitation center together, Maya noticed Daniel stopping to greet other patients, encouraging someone struggling with speech therapy, making a joke that helped lighten someone's frustration with physical limitations. She realized that his experience had transformed him into someone who understood recovery from the inside, someone who could offer hope because he had lived it. "You're thinking about becoming a therapist yourself?" Maya observed. Daniel looked surprised. "How did you know?" "The way you interact with people here. The way you seem to understand exactly what they need to hear." "I've been thinking about it," he admitted. "Using what we've learned, to help other people who are trying to find their way back from trauma." Maya felt a surge of excitement about the possibilities ahead of them. "We could work together. Music therapy and rehabilitation. Your understanding of recovery and my experience with healing through sound. A team," Daniel said, squeezing her hand. "A family," Maya corrected. That evening, Daniel took Maya to dinner at a small restaurant where his family was waiting to welcome her officially to Colorado. The evening was warm and full of laughter, stories about Daniel's childhood, questions about Maya's background, and a gradual sense of belonging that felt both surprising and inevitable. Carmen pulled Maya aside as they were leaving. "I want you to know that I've never seen my brother this happy. Even before the accident, he was always searching for something he couldn't name. I think he was searching for you." "I don't know about that," Maya said. "But I know that finding him changed everything for me too." "The night before his accident," Carmen continued, "he called me and said he felt like he was waiting for his real life to begin. Like everything up to that point had just been preparation for something important that was coming." Maya felt chills as she considered the implications of that conversation. "Do you think he somehow knew?" "I don't know what I think about fate or destiny," Carmen said. "But I know that you two found each other in a way that feels bigger than coincidence." Later that night, in the small apartment Daniel had found for them near the rehabilitation center, Maya unpacked her things. While Daniel watched from the bed where he was supposed to be resting, but was too excited to sleep. "Sing for me," he said, as she hung up the last of her clothes. "What would you like to hear?" "The first song. The one you sang that very first night." Maya settled beside him and began to sing her grandmother's lullaby, the one about a mother waiting for her child to come home. But as the familiar melody filled their new space, she realized that the song had completed its journey. It was no longer about waiting or searching or hoping for return. It was about recognition, about two people who had found their way to each other through darkness and music, and the kind of love that could only exist when someone is brave enough to sing into silence, trusting that somewhere, someone is listening. When she finished the song, Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "Maya," he said finally, "will you marry me?" The question was simple, direct, and completely right. Maya looked at this man who had awakened to the sound of her voice, who had chosen to build a new life rather than simply returning to his old one, who had taught her that sometimes the most important thing you can do is show up for someone who has no one else. "Yes," she said, "but only if you promise me something. Anything. Promise me that we'll keep singing. Not just to each other, but to anyone who needs to hear that they're not alone." Daniel smiled and pulled her close. "I promise. We'll sing for everyone who needs to find their way home." Outside their window, the mountains stood silhouetted against the stars, ancient and permanent and beautiful. Inside their small apartment, two people who had found each other in the most impossible circumstances fell asleep to the sound of each other's breathing, finally home. Epilogue 5 years later, Maya and Daniel stood in the dedication ceremony for the newest wing of St. Helena Medical Center. The Maya Martinez Music Therapy Center was the culmination of years of work, research, and advocacy for the healing power of music in medical settings. The wing included private rooms designed for optimal acoustics, a recording studio where patients could preserve messages for their families, and a training center where medical professionals learned to incorporate music into patient care. Dr. Patterson, now retired but serving on the Center's advisory board, spoke about the profound changes he had witnessed in patient outcomes when music became part of their treatment protocol. It started with one nurse who believed that no one should heal in silence, he said, looking at Maya in the audience. It grew into a program that has transformed how we think about recovery, hope, and the human connections that make healing possible. Maya and Daniel now ran the center together, training nurses in music therapy techniques, working with Coma patients and their families, and conducting research on the neurological effects of music during unconsciousness and recovery. Their own family had grown to include 2 children, a daughter named Harmony and a son named David, who had inherited their parents' love of music and their understanding that sometimes the most important thing you can do is show up for someone who needs you. But perhaps most importantly, they had never stopped singing for patients who had no one else. Every evening, as their shift ended, Maya and Daniel would walk through the ICU together, offering their voices to anyone who was healing alone. The program they had created had spread to hospitals across the country, training thousands of healthcare workers in the simple but powerful practice of bringing music to places where only medical sounds had existed before. In her speech at the dedication ceremony, Maya talked about her grandmother's lullabies, about the night she first sang to an unconscious patient, about the miraculous discovery that love could grow in the most unlikely soil. Music doesn't cure illness, she said, but it reminds us that we are more than our diagnoses, more than our injuries, more than our limitations. It reminds us that we are human beings capable of connection, beauty, and hope, even in our darkest moments. After the ceremony, Maya and Daniel walked through the new wing together, visiting with patients, meeting with families, and stopping in each room where someone was healing alone to offer the gift that had brought them together, a voice singing into darkness, trusting that somewhere, someone was listening. In room 314 of the original ICU, which had been preserved exactly as it was the night Daniel first woke up, a new patient lay unconscious, surrounded by the quiet hum of medical equipment and the soft sound of Maya's voice singing a lullaby about finding your way home. The circle was complete, but the song continued, carried forward by new voices, new hearts, new believers in the power of showing up for someone who is no one else. And somewhere in the darkness between sleep and waking, between silence and sound, between loneliness and love, another soul heard the music and began the long journey back to the light. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.